Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast. Here with my co-host Benji Naesen. This show is supported by Lacole, who produce performance cycling apparel. Boy, oh boy, do we have a weird old stage to recap today at the Tour de Suisse Stage 7, the second individual time trial, a up and down ITT, 23 Ks long. They do a 9.5K climb at 6.5% average gradient. It's pretty regular. And then descend the other side to Andermatt, which is like a long straight descent. And then I think 15 or so hairpins. Most of the riders opted to do it on their TT bikes. Ineos and EF did anyway. But Benji's pick on the podcast, no, not his main pick, let's be clear, but definitely he said his outsider pick to win the stage was Rigoberto Uran, the man who hasn't won a race since Tour of Slovenia Stage 3 in 2018, hasn't won a World Tour race since Tour de France 2017, is maybe one of the most defensive, boring riders in the world, although I might have given the reins to Wilco Kelderman. He wins today's stage, so big props to Benji. He wasn't even the top 5 favourites, and he wins this by about 40 seconds on Julian Alaphilippe in a 36-minute TT. Before I do the top 10, Benji, even you didn't expect Uran to win by 40 seconds.
Yeah, of course not. I had him as a rider that can definitely win this time trial because of the history that I remember with him. I recall him winning a Giro time trial, the one where Quintana crashed in 2015-16. That was what got me to say Uran yesterday, together with the descent of the Iseran that eventually got cancelled. He was also descending very strong there, very similar descent in the way it works, and that's why I went for it. And I think it paid off, I guess. I think it's probably my proudest prediction of the year so far, I'd say, because there's been a few, but this is out there because it's been so long and so forth. I just like seeing him win because he's such a weird guy on social media, the most popular Southern American cyclist in the world when it comes to his followers on Instagram. Actually, the most popular cyclist on Instagram when it comes to his followers.
Yeah.
The man has so much such a large following in Southern America that is so cool to see that he's so popular and that he makes such funny jokes, like the time he cut a part out of a shoe because he had a foot injury, for example, stuff like that. Makes me love the guy.
Here's the top 10. Uran first on 36 minutes and 2 seconds. Alaphilippe second, 40 seconds back. He rode the whole thing on a road bike, and it was definitely slower. He lost a lot on the descent to Uran. Uran was doing 100 Ks on the descent. Gino made a third, same time as Carapaz fourth on 54, Dumoulin fifth on 56, Cataneo 58, then Pozzovivo 1 minute, same time as Costa, SKA, and Kung rounding out the top 10. My pick, my outsider for the day was Fuglsang. That was not a good pick. He didn't do well, 16th. But we did say that the one thing we said yesterday for certain was that this would be a weird TT with weird results, and that's what we have, a very mixed bag top 10. I think the big surprise, Benji, is Dennis and Schachmann, and Fuglsang even as well, but particularly Schachmann being beaten by, say, Stefan Kung on such a climbing-heavy course. Does that surprise you?
Yeah, it certainly does. I think that Schachmann has had great time trials on rolling hills and so forth. He's been able to climb very well this Tour de Suisse also in previous climbing stages as well before in this season and previous seasons. I think that I expected much more from Schachmann. Genuinely a disappointment today. Fuglsang's a bit of an inconsistent one in time trials, but because of the climbing aspect, I was expecting a good one here, like you are mentioning. And I think that we saw that, was it Andalusia time trial last year where he, I think, just lost to Dylan Teuns or something, or just won from Dylan Teuns. Vaguely remember something like that. That was a flat draw, definitely wasn't a mountain time trial, and this was, so I'd expect him to be better on this terrain, and he just completely fell through on the climb itself already and did worse than Schachmann on the climb itself. So yeah, very disappointing. And let's talk about Michael Woods as well. What the hell?
Yeah.
He's such a bad time trialist. If he goes to the Tour for GC, he might as well stop already because there's no way in hell he's staying anywhere close. I'd go for stage wins.
Yeah, his TT is really bad, losing 2.5 minutes on this TT. he's going to lose minutes and minutes hand over fist to the Slovenians and Thomas and Port and all the half-decent TT. Even Alaphilippe, he'll lose a bucket load of time. And then Alaphilippe's the guy he'll be competing against for like puncher finishes, as well as the Slovenians. So GC at the Tour looking really rough for Israel Startup Nation at the moment. I think
they've got Froome, man.
Yeah,
sorry,
Dan Martin as well. So they've basically got it's a weird team. Anyway, I think it was interesting to see only one rider I saw tried to change bikes. Costa did the climb on the road bike, then changed to the TT bike. I'll just read some intermediate splits out so the quickest intermediate to T1, so the climbing section, Uran 12 seconds ahead of Alaphilippe. So Alaphilippe he's looking in great shape for the Tour climbing wise. I mean, he did it on a road bike. He did it on his World Champs road bike. Filippo Ganna dishonoured. Will Alaphilippe be fined? Stay tuned for that. His second fine of the Tour de Suisse. 12 seconds after Uran, pretty good. But they did it 27 k's an hour. So not a big, if they can get the TT bikes to 7.5 kilos, maybe they can't. But TT bike seems to be better there because the quickest time on the downhill section was Poles. Actually, he did 68 k's an hour average for 9 minutes 57. So Poles, his climbing is really bad. It was Poles climbing coming 16th on the climb. Maybe he kept it back on the descent. What about Dumoulin, Benji? He came 6th at the T1 and then 12th on the descent, 5th overall. That's got to be a pretty encouraging result for him.
I think that's an amazing time trial for him, man. I think on paper, from the climbing we've seen this Tour de Suisse, I might say that a somewhat flatter time trial might fit him even more in the longer sense. So let's look at Tokyo's time trial in our minds, and we see a parcours that's not flat, but it's also not a mountain time trial. So this is very, very promising for Tom Dumoulin in terms of that race I'm expecting.
Now, what I want to know is, and I don't know because I'm not anywhere near a pro rider, and these TTs are so irregular. Is Rigoberto Uran or Cataneo, Pozzovivo, are they better climbers than Carapaz? No, they're not. But it's a 27-minute climb, 26-minute climb. How is Pozzovivo putting 21 seconds into Carapaz on a climb, even though it's on TT bikes? Is it down to comfort on the TT bike and their ability to put out power with a different hip angle? What is contributing to that? Is it pacing? Is Pozzovivo going harder on the climb, and then he lost on the descent because he did a very, very bad descent? Pozzovivo, he was 42nd on the descent section, losing 31 seconds to Uran, and sort of that's how Carapaz leapfrogged him. Alaphilippe did really bad on the descent too. And if anyone says TT bike versus road bike on a descent, it seems to me, I mean, Alaphilippe, good handler. This is pretty good evidence, just without any actual statistics other than what we've seen, that the TT bikes were quicker, unless it's very, very technical. Yeah. This even had hairpins, and Uran did the descent 28 seconds quicker. So, yeah, it's food for thought. But any other interesting facts from this TT, Benji? What about Dennis' performance? Are you surprised by him?
I first want to go back to your point about why an Uran, for example, can do better on this kind of parcours. I think it's through the way that this climb is also, because this climb is a 6.5%, 9.5 kilometer climb, 6.5% steady gradient. There's no peaks to 9%. There's no peaks to 11%. There's nothing like that. There's that exact gradient that is not high enough, which means that riders like an Uran and so forth can go onto the large ring on their bike and hammer those watts purely on the large ring. And we saw Carapaz even with a larger ring than he usually does. So I'm expecting that teams were thinking about that this climb plays a role in that. And I think that, for example, a rider like Schachmann, who was playing on a much smaller ring from what we could see, well, he was pedaling much faster. That's basically the easy explanation there. And that didn't really work out for him. So it seems like it really worked on the big ring for the specialists of that big ring. Cataneo is very good at that. That's why he's good at this kind of time trial. That's why I somewhat looked at him as well today. I saw him come like 6 seconds behind Mader the second that Mader was still in the lead. So I was like, okay, that's probably a reason for that. Mader seemed to be on a pretty big ring as well. Dumoulin's great at that. Carapaz changed towards that, like I just mentioned. So it's clear that that is the big thing that everybody on top here at the front of that first intermediate chose from. And then it's also down to your gut in the descent, because I think that Uran genuinely is more daring in descents. We've seen him done a lot of great descents in the past, and it's better in those long straight descents than the ones with shady corners and hairpins and so forth. And I think that plays a role as well here. I think if it was more technical with a road bike and so forth, then an Alaphilippe descent would probably be much closer to what Uran would perform on that type of parkour, if that makes any sense.
Rigoberto Uran can win the Mont Ventoux stage in this upcoming Tour de France if he goes for stages. It's got a long, fast descent, I believe, off the last descent of Ventoux. He's good enough at climbing to maybe definitely stay in a breakaway group, and if he goes for if he's staying in the GC group, maybe, but problematic.
He's going for GC.
I know he's going to go for GC, but that's probably why he doesn't win as many stages. If he could definitely, that would be a stage he could win if he wasn't a GC threat, because he needs to get away on the descent. Yep. I mean, if you want any further evidence that TT climbing is not the same as normal climbing, Esteban Chavez, who was flying on the climb the other day, did the climbing section 2 minutes and 30 seconds, I believe, slower than Rigoberto Uran. 2 minutes and 26 seconds slower. That is insane how much slower he did. He did it slower than Fred Wright, and Fred Wright's like 25 kilos heavier than him. So yeah.
I have a question though. Like, this kind of climb, it's also, like I just mentioned, that gradient is not amazing, which means that it's also got draft benefit in normal stages, not in a time trial. Do you think that a climber like a Chavez obviously benefits more from the draft on a road stage, but do you think that it is more troublesome for someone like Chavez to produce the same watts when not having that draft benefit compared to a rider like Uran and Carapaz that we've seen ride better when he's alone on such gradients?
Maybe, but Chavez went on his own early in Catalonia. He went early the other day. He's not like a guy that sort of jumps late. I don't know. Yeah. I just don't really know why. But what we do know is that the GC is back on. It's not a formality, this Tour de Suisse, anymore. Tomorrow's stage 8, 160 kilometres long. It starts out the gate with a Cat 1, 11 Ks, 5.5% descent. Then the Lukmanier pass. I think the other side, I think they pretty much do this. This is the reverse direction of the stage the other day.
Yep.
16 Ks, 5.5%. Long fishbowl valley, and then back up to the San Gotardo pass, 13.5 Ks, 6.7%. Descent, then a flat finish. The GC there's not a big gap for Carapaz anymore. He keeps the leader's jersey, but Alaphilippe's going home, I believe, because his child's being born on Monday, so he's out. So GC is Carapaz 17 seconds ahead of Uran, 1 minute and 7 back to Schachmann, then Fulsang at 1:15, then a big gap. Woods, Pozzovivo, Uman, Costa, Chavez, Cataneo, all 3 to 4 minutes back. So Uran v Carapaz, it's really on this last stage. It would be a big scalp for Uran. Let me check his team first, just because I haven't been paying attention to them apart from Bissegger's performance. Powerless Benji, satellite rider tomorrow for Rigoberto Uran?
He should. I think that Uran needs to try something. He's not necessarily the rider we've seen attack a lot in his history, but we've seen a few Uran attacks out there. I'm hoping that we see him try something, but I think that it's going to be really tough to put Carapaz in actual trouble on this parkour. There's climbs at the start, which indeed allows for satellite riders to go ahead, but they took care of that fairly easily on the stage. Was it yesterday? Yes, where Alaphilippe had that early attack and so forth. So I'd love it if Paulus does it. It would fit well.
Yeah, I think Uran needs someone to pace for him on the climbs to set something up, but I think Carapaz on a road bike, it might be difficult to shake off on a descent as well. And there's that long valley. It has to be the last climb. You can't go on the first two climbs, I don't think. It's so far from the finish.
Yeah, but
110 k's far
Uran doesn't
away.
have the acceleration, I think, to drop Carapaz in any way. I just don't see it happening. I hope it becomes tens at some point, but I find it very difficult to believe that we'll see a point where Carapaz is literally unable to follow an attack by Rigoberto Uran. It just doesn't make sense in my mind.
I'm trying to see how technical the descent is off the back of the San
Carapaz didn't
Gotthard.
even lose that much time in the descent today, I think. Like,
Nah.
it was 53 seconds at the top and I think 50 seconds at the bottom or something.
It looks like there's about 3 turns in it. It looks like it's going to be difficult for Uran. But hopefully he tries, and hopefully he goes and tries on, I don't know, the San Gotthard pass, tries to bridge across to Paulus, who paces him, maybe Ineos. I mean, they've got Eddie Dunbar is pretty much the only guy that's going to be there working on the meat of that climb. So, yeah, maybe Ineos will be vulnerable, but I think it'll be tough. I think Dunbar can shut down any sort of Nielsen Powell's Uran attack without too much trouble. So Carapaz still firmly in the box seat, despite Uran giving him a big scare today and hopefully one tomorrow. But hope you enjoyed this recap. Stay tuned now, if you're listening on podcast players, for the Tour of Slovenia Stage 4 recap. But if you're on YouTube, give us a like down below, and we'll see you with the Tour de Suisse Final Stage 8 recap tomorrow.